Hi, I'm Gianluca Fiorelli and welcome back to the third session. Today we have one interesting, very interesting guest. She's a person that works with our friends of WordLift, also collaborated with Lazarina Stoy, recent guest of the third session for ML for SEO Academy. And she is one of the most interesting voices lately in everything related to semantics, entity search, agentic search, and so on. She is Italian, lives in Rome, and just before the start of this episode, she was narrating me as many Italians. She's a first generation Rome. All the families coming from other part of Italy, as it was in my case. I'm a first generation Milanese. And this guest of today is Beatrice Gamba. Oh, Beatrice, how are you doing?
Hi, I am very good, actually. Thanks for
Hey,
asking.
cool. It's a real pleasure for me to meet you actually for the first time because we never met in real life, probably.
I think we
Uh,
did. You
Probably we
were,
did when I visited Wordlift a couple of years ago.
yeah, and you were a guest at an SEO meetup that we organized at
Yes,
Bustina
yes.
Station. I arrived late because I had work meetings, but I remember your talk because you talked
Yes, it
about
was
action
a
figures, and I remember about that.
yes, it was a nice experience. And let's see. I know that in the future, WorldLift is also collaborating for organizing an event to serve Conf in
Yeah.
Rome, the Rome edition. So surely we will meet in Rome in the future. So let's start with the classic question I do to all my guests. How SEO is treating you lately?
Well, I do believe that this is a most interesting time for SEOs. I'm one of the excited ones. There are like two different ways of seeing this, right? There's people that are buried underneath the need to justify the measurements, the zero click search, and then there's the people that are excited about this and that want to stay on top of things, and I am amongst the latter. Also, because I'm one person that always strives to get informed. I like to study. That's all I've been doing all my life, and it's what suits me best. So I think that also everything new that comes into the industry is like a means for me to improve. And yes, I guess that under these times, what we must do is constantly learn. And at the end of the day, this is successful. And it's also what makes our client successful. When we are informed consultants, we can help better. So, I mean, I'm very excited.
Yes, it's surely, and I mean it's also clear from your side that you are excited because you, I mean, you are quite vocal and quite visible with all the things that you are studying, implementing, discovering, and so on. This is surely something that all of us must be grateful for because sharing the knowledge is surely the best thing for making all the search industry grow together. And let's say, what a passionate point of view, not from a marketing point of view, not from a student point of view, but really from something that is igniting your passion about everything related to AI, entity search, semantics, etc., etc., etc. What is the thing that made you just a few years ago or 3 years ago when all these things started to enter in the daily life of an ACO, let's say so, made you really say, okay, this is something that I love? What was the thing that ignited you this passion for all these topics?
Well, for instance, because I started my SEO career at WordLift, actually, I lived in Berlin for 3 years where I worked for Zalando. and I was working in mainly operations, so payments and other things. Not quite as exciting. Then I moved back to Rome. I studied a little bit the web and SEO practices, and I applied to work at WordLift, and that's where basically I learned everything. And of course, it was a privilege for me because WordLift has always been this AI powered SEO platform and advisory agency. So we started doing hands on AI since the beginning. So this is like I got incepted into these concepts early at the beginning of my SEO career 10 years ago now. So to me, what I liked the most about it was the actual technicalities of it, like learning how knowledge representation, like knowledge graphs and ontologies, could apply to something that is natural, which is content and information, because we consume daily loads of information and content, sometimes without even noticing or knowing the word that sits behind this. And to be on the other side, to be the one that actually made information more useful and tied the people that looked for specific information and connect them to the right information. To me, it was like I really felt that this role applied to myself, like in a way that I could be also useful. I don't know. So it sounds philosophical, but it's very, tied in reality for me.
No, and it is, but I think, and I tell it with all my honesty, because it's something that I also feel when I want to share things related to ontology, how to create a taxonomy, and blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I feel that, okay, this concept have been for many, many years. So high level, so somehow academic, but then there is always some sort of uncanny valley, using a term which is somehow on topic, in how to translate this concept that sometimes may sound very abstract into practical daily blueprints to follow, daily workflow, etc., etc., etc. How you personally, also considering that you are teaching, yeah, in ML for SEO, all these things, how you evolve from being maybe too academic to something to be very practical, very actionable when explaining the importance, for instance, of creating an ontology, from there creating a taxonomy, what really means creating a knowledge graph and why it's important. How were you able to make this switch in order to make people taking you seriously in terms of let's do the work?
Yeah, right. This is a good question. And I also go and speak at knowledge graph and connected data specific conferences. And in the past few years, what everyone has been saying is how sometimes as consultants, we couldn't even use the word knowledge graph or ontology before. It was like, okay, let's not mention it. Let's say that we represent knowledge and we provide with tools and platforms that help decision making and content production processes. But lately, with AI and LLM, everyone wants to make sure that their processes are grounded in data. So now ontologies and knowledge graphs are cool. Of course, as you're saying, they are still perceived as, academic artifacts because it's hard for companies to accept also at an intellectual level the importance of knowledge graphs, for example. They may understand it, but then they fail in an operational way. I mean, sometimes it's because it's how you approach a problem, right? When clients come to us because we do SEO, but we also build graphs and ontologies, taxonomies. So we always start to addressing a problem, right? And how we approach the problem is how we are able to insert and discuss, involve our clients. Common misconceptions are like, okay, the knowledge graph is like only a technical infrastructure. And this is wrong because a knowledge graph is actually something that you can use that can help figuring out exactly what your website is about, what your company talks about. And it's a useful tool when it's not purely perceived as technical. Otherwise, there's the, okay, it's not immediate. It's not something that happens overnight. That's also right. But SEO hasn't always been immediate. So again, it's how we want to approach the problem. And these tools are really there to simplify and not to complicate. And this is also what I try and strive to do in my day-to-day job, to make things easier and to make processes smoother for companies. Also because I work mostly with enterprise, bigger companies, and sometimes there are obvious frictions. And
Yes, they friction that were existing even before everything semantics and also in the old times of classic, super classic SEO. And I don't know if it's your case, but in my case, I noticed that a good way to translate somehow the complexity. I mean, we cannot deny that sometimes explaining these kind of things is not easy because they are not easy. I mean, it's not like explaining this is an apple. I noticed that many times finding the correct metaphor is a fantastic way to explain things. And one I use, I don't know if you could agree with me, or maybe even if you use something similar, is saying, okay, let's think that a bot, an agent, is someone entering inside your library and where all the books are, let's say, your products, as you have categorized them, etc., etc., etc. But he is able to see all the books at the same time. And they start seeing that, okay, this book, which is this red book about, I don't know, something, actually could be put closer to this other book, the blue cover, because it's about another things, but can be related. And so I explained that creating knowledge graph is especially creating these invisible connection and using tools for making these connection more evident. As well, for instance, using another, in this case, cinematographic metaphor, I remember that the movie with Russell Crowe, don't remember the title of the movie, but where Russell Crowe is a very famous mathematician. And there is a famous sequence where he's looking at that blackboard and he's starting to see the numbers illuminating. So because he say, what we have to do is to make agent being able to do the same. So when I find this kind of metaphor, so in a way to make this concept easier to be understood. Do you use something similar like me or?
yes, yeah, in a way, I like to say, yeah, similar to what you said before. It's a snapshot. So it's a snapshot of your organization. And when you start breaking down the fact that a company, a website can be broken down into smaller but more straightforward concepts of entities, and doing practical examples also helps, because the actual thing about knowledge graphs, for example, is that they are actually reducing the organizational fragmentations. Because when you try to understand again the problem that a company has, sometimes it's about having multiple e-commerce catalogs or having multiple editorial content workflows working at the same time, or scattered product documentation. So when you really understand the problem and you tell them, okay, this is how we are able to solve it, and then that's how we nail the conversations. So for example, many e-commerce websites that we work with, at the beginning, they have so many spreadsheets and catalogs. And then when we work them out, when we usually start with the data analysis. So we gather all the data products from our clients and we make sense of the data. And then we organize them depending on the need into ontologies or knowledge graphs or taxonomies, depending on what's the goal of the project. And then we can really help them out. So we understand who it serves, what problem it solves, what are the concepts associated to every product, for example. And then this is like reinforcement of the value. So a knowledge graph becomes like the semantic layer that can also be shared across different departments. So what we do with knowledge graph is that we produce internal efficiency before SEO gains become visible, because these kind of tools are primarily used for internal decision making. Like when last time I went to the knowledge graph conference in New York, actually what we do at WordLift, for example, is we publish the data in the knowledge graph. And this is like one of a kind use case, actually, because most big companies only use knowledge graphs for internal purposes. And when people approach us and they are very curious about, okay, so you are publishing the data. And then when we explain all the advantages and benefits in terms of visibility and giving LLMs material to reason about your brand and your website, and then it's not that immediate, even to people that have been working in the industry for many years. But it's a very interesting angle. So yeah, there are multiple purposes for building such tools.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And surely knowledge graph is, if we should start thinking about building knowledge graph. And for instance, you were talking about big enterprise e-commerce website, but I can think of so many, practically every type of industry. For instance, I have a client in the B2B. We substantially all their content up until not so many years ago was substantially living in PDF. And so you have to extract all that data in order to make it visible, and then starting connecting all the dots, all the information, this data, in order to be understood. First, they were simple, not simple, by classic search engines, and then starting also with AI model. Apart that, I think it's also somehow incorrect talking of classic search engine AI model, because Google, for instance, is using AI for many, many years, even very much before Gemini and so on. But if we should, obviously, the problem of working on knowledge graph and then ontology, taxonomy, whatsoever, is it's quite titanic work. It's not something that you can do, okay, let's do. So do you agree with me that maybe the first knowledge graph that should be work is the one related to the brand itself?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, this is also like what we try to make understand is that a brand itself, it's a system of entities because of how the web works. So basically a brand online is actually interpreted through relationships. So what is this brand producing? Who this brand is serving? So when we do knowledge graphs or entity SEO, we are basically formalizing these relationships explicitly to Google or LLMs. So in this way, we're also reinforcing the authority of the brand. So a lot is about companies that approach us want to gain authority over their brand. And they are fearful of either Google not interpreting their brand in the correct way. So how do I maintain the sovereignty over my brand? in a web that takes bits of information here and there. And also in this case, having proper structured data and having all of your entities in place really help. So of course we are not hallucination free, and also with all the user generated content being picked up sometimes primarily by LLMs, it's not easy. But if you are delivering and structuring the information in the right way, in an organized way, then it's easier and it's less of a black box for the machine to understand that there should be no ambiguity about your brand. But also, on the other way, when you want to describe your brand with data, Tommy Seal, who is a really great guy working in the knowledge graph industry for years, described it as the ontological core, which are the main entities that we want to focus on. And this has also always been in the SEO industry, like let's define and stay on these guardrails. Let's not talk about everything. Let's focus on what we are best at. And let's nail the industry, our industry, not many industry. And this can be done with data. So defining the core entities in a very organized and thorough way, not just sometimes also companies approach structured data in a poor manner. So just scribbling down the least amount of properties to have validated markup. And this is also not useful. And sometimes it costs a lot of money because structured data can be expensive in terms of production for the technical and development department. Not everyone is good at it. And sometimes there are some tools that do the very basic stuff that's not useful. So it's rather having less entities, but better related and defined rather than having structured data everywhere that's like carbon copy for all the pages.
And I think this is a classic problem of maybe, I mean, it's touching also a big enterprise company, but it's more evident for, let's say, small to medium companies. Because maybe usually these kind of companies relies on, let's say, the same WordPress, and so WordPress translated to using plugins. And plugins always treated, for instance, schema as rich results, not as structured data. And therefore, or you have a very basic, as you were saying it, but very basic implementation of structured data, which is fine if it was correct. But sometimes it's also incorrectly implemented, but very difficult to correct or even improve. For instance, and not because I'm against the plugin of Yoast SEO, but Yoast SEO does a relatively good job. But if you want something more, you are obliged to know how to disable the function of designing the schema that the Yoast SEO plugin has. And then obviously you have to, these small companies will start to need thinking, okay, but so if this is so important, then I need to hire in-house or at least as a consultant, a developer, apart my SEO, and the SEO should know these things. Does he know these things? Etc., etc., etc. But I have another question, because we are talking a lot about data. And how much is important that the data and, let's say, the narrative, so the physical written content, the physical image used on the website, the video used on the website, even the audio, everything, which is usually defined as content, but not as data. Let's say unstructured content and the data as structured content. How much is important that they are very well orchestrated and not contradicting themselves?
Yeah, I mean, if we are giving Google and other AI mixed signals, it's not a good sign in itself. And this is also why I think everyone in SEO starts with an audit. Every project has always been starting with an audit. So let's see what's actually on the page. Do we have a main keyword? Does all of the content on the page meet the main keyword, or are we just talking about something else? And also in this way, like having a knowledge graph when working with data helps in making you understand what's wrong and what's right. So having a snapshot makes you understand better how to, do your work. And also we have working with clients. What I like is when they come back to us and say, because last time you said this thing, we know this other issue on these pages, can you help us out? So when we are fostering the notions and pass them on to our clients. And this is also how I see that we are winning the client. It's very important to also be able to upskill the clients and the people we work for because, as you said, not everyone is proficient at data or at working with data. And it's also not needed, but teaching the mindset is something that we are able to do. Most organizations are not even lacking the data. They lack, as you said, structured meaning. And there are some enormous data sets that contain informational value. And sometimes this data is unusable for AI systems because of the inconsistencies amongst the attributes, because there are naming conventions that are not fixed, and ourselves as consultants, we can do much. I mean, we can open tables with all the stakeholders, explains, hey, these are the inconsistencies that we noticed. We should use this single name for this specific product, but these other names are clashing. When we work together with the client, we are able to make a difference. When the client has the mindset and the space to actually welcome such structures, not as a mere technical infrastructure, but as something that will be an asset, because this type of technologies are actual assets for companies. It's not just something that we do structured data or content production for, because at WordLift, we use the knowledge graph also for grounding the content generation process. So I really think that the ability of the SEO and the AI consultant in itself as a role is of primary importance. How passionate we are and how we are able to convey the importance and also the criticalities of every team of every company.
Yes, and I think that you hinted somehow one important thing that when we talk of data, maybe it's not 100% correct to create the association with data synonym of structured data. Data is not only structured data. In fact, the knowledge graph is eventually using structured data as we know it as a way to conform the structured data, but there are many other things. For instance, because if it was the structured data as Google thinks about structured data, RDF was deprecated by Google, but it's still super fundamental for knowledge graph. And another thing, I want to move a little further. I think it was at the Knowledge Graph conference of last year, you were talking about semantic alchemy, which is a wonderful combination of words. But what did you really mean with this combo, semantic alchemy?
Yeah, and so basically that's a description of what we actually do. So as I said before, there are some gaps that happens when you're treating data transformation as a knowledge graph engineering process, but it's actually a content and analytics task. So the essential insight here is that AI performance is constrained not necessarily by the capability of a model, but by its semantic grounding. So language models generate better outputs when they are anchored to structured representations of reality that are guided because these models have already have all the data that they need. But the data is what they were trained with. But if we are able to support them with how we are structuring our realities, then it facilitates. So I broke down the data analysis process that we do in the 5 phases of the alchemy. So there's the preparation, and it's where we clean and normalize the data. So the main outcome there is the reliability of the data itself. So we clean the data out. We make every entity one entity per concept. So not having different attributes or inconsistent attributes. Then there's the healing phase, which is where we create the ontology. So we are creating a shared meaning within an organization about its data, about its content, whatever the object of the project is. So the presentation was about Luxottica, which is one of our main clients at WorldLift, and how we basically took their products, helped them insert their data inside our product management infrastructure. Then on top of it, we created an ontology for the eyeglasses industry itself. Then there's the AI activation. What do we do with this ontology, with this knowledge graph? Like, okay, we've built it. It's amazing. It helped us understanding many things internally, but what do we do with it? How do we do the AI activation with these tools? Um, the outcome here is the scalable intelligence, let's say. So we are able to ground AI models to ontologies and knowledge graph. So this model become like sentient, and they become these mega experts of the eyeglass and eyewear industry. So they know both the domain because we broke down the eyeglass domain in the ontology, plus they know all of the product catalog because we built a product knowledge graph. So when the AI models is able to scan both the eyewear ontology and the brand product knowledge graph with, of course, its intelligence on top, then it's able to produce content or any other type of outputs that we produce at WordList, internal linking, specific copies for newsletters, intro text, FAQs, whatever you wish to add to your site. It makes it really scalable. What does scalable mean even for big companies? Where's the value there? So the value, of course, is in the discoverability. So the truths that you get from adding this content to your site. But there are also like company costs that are being cut. So we analyze that when a company is generating content with an AGI, so let's say with just ChatGPT with a semi-structured prompt, but not a personalized model, it takes many reviews, internal reviews, before reaching a good output that's production ready. So there are a lot of iterations, and then we know that, for example, in big companies it's hard to review the content because there are many departments that are involved. So there's the marketing, the legal, sometimes even the business departments are looking at this content, and you're involving many stakeholders and wasting a lot of time in the process. When you are tying the content generation process to ontologies, knowledge graphs, when you are grounding the process in data, it takes less iteration to arrive to an optimal output. So you are actually decreasing the cost for the company. So it's not only a matter, of course, it's also a matter of quality, but there's also like money saving
So substantially, what you are doing with this kind of workflow orchestration, I don't know how to call it really, is substantially you are training your own AI model on your own data. Essentially, it's instead of giving immediately everything to, I'm saying very a barbaric thing, give all the data directly to ChatGPT, and the ChatGPT in general is maybe able to do something, but no, you create an AI model which is trained only on the brand and product and whatsoever, let's say, call it lore, knowledge graph, ontologies, and taxonomy, and even maybe fed with all the unstructured content to train again over combining all this knowledge. So to then substantially producing everything because you are producing what could be, you were saying internal linking. So a stronger internal linking, which is a better navigation, which can translate in a better conversion rate. But also, let's say, more classic agentic features like a more intelligent chatbot, or even exported to ChatGPT, a specific branded GPT, which is able to substantially from ChatGPT interface directly connect with the website. And so without making the people go to the website, maybe like the ultimate step and so on. So it somehow reminds me of what I wrote also about something maybe we not with the same correctness and same structured exactness, but it was I define as the essential store, where I was substantially saying, okay, we create a different knowledge graph, then merge them and start making inferring the relation between these knowledge graph and then create everything from there. Somehow similar, no?
Yeah, yeah. And let me tell you, we have been working with insurance lately. So of course, us as an agency, we work, I mean, WordLift is a product, but the innovation hub that I oversee is basically an agency inside WordLift. And we work with all type of industries. And every industry type has a specific need. Of course, there are some industries that are heavily regulated, especially in the era of AI. If an insurance company approaches AI and still wants to, try it out, they want to be certain that there are all the regulation and policies are met. And right now we are also adding to the graph the policies and regulation to make sure related to the industry. And also in the ontology, we can do that so that also the model understands that there are guardrails, that there are regulation within the industry, and teaching, the model on how to be like the perfect insurance content copywriter that knows. I mean, it's also humanly impossible to know everything. And this is also why content is revised by different teams. But if we teach to the same model how to replicate the revision steps of the different stakeholders of the different teams, then we are even cutting out even more of their time.
Yeah, yes, because ultimately, for instance, you could create sub-agents that are, you are the legal, you are the business, you are, etc., etc. So at the same time, they verify everything. And I think this is even more important when we have brands that are multi-country, for instance. So in this case, everything, the classic legal constraints can impact a lot. Classic international SEO with problems like how can I hide this product but I cannot sell it, for instance, in India, but it's available everywhere. But I mean, I need to say the classic technical SEO issues that usually are related to international SEO. So, in fact, many times when I create something smaller or prototyping things, I also put a sort creating all a sort of knowledge base in terms of technical SEO in order to say all these things. If you have, for instance, this legal issue, consider these things. in terms of solution in technical SEO. And one problem that obviously we always deal with as a user is hallucination. But how well or what kind of problem still exists when you are creating all these agentic system based on knowledge graph and ontology and entities? First, how this kind of work is able to reduce the risk of hallucination. Second, how you deal, let's say, as maybe another agent, which is the guardian, to have the model to assess itself before generating something in order to see if it's hallucinating or not. How do you deal with the hallucination problem?
Yeah, right. So basically what we do is, of course, when we are setting up the process, there will always be information missing because many companies that are approaching AI for the first time do not know what is needed. And sometimes we also do not know because we are not working inside the company. So usually we do at least one iteration where we add everything that we have available to the graph, to the ontology, and we start generating. And then typically what happens next is that the client says, okay, oh, I forgot that we also have this other policy paper. We also have this other style guide, editorial guidelines to be added. So we try to make sure at the beginning that we have everything that we need and that is needed to, build the boundaries. And then as we start generating, sometimes everything will pop up. I mean, there is not a case where it's hallucination free. Something always comes up because even when you are grounding a model with data, it's not 100% hallucination free. It's not a goal even because it can't be. But how we deal is that we structure feedback loops for our client where we ask to be given feedback in such a way that is useful for the model so that we can go back and fine tune the model according to the feedback that's been given to us. This is also how we promote the human in the loop concept because the automation without governance, it's not something that works. It's basically almost only entropy. So we never deliver content that's like 100% machine generated. We usually have a human editor revising it depending on the terms of the contract, of course. But we also have an agent that reviews it, as I said before. But we try to instate a human in the loop because, of course, AI systems are highly effective at scaling outputs, but they cannot independently guarantee the conceptual correctness of the content. So human oversight is also not a safety mechanism alone, but it almost become like a knowledge design function. So we have the conceptual authority, where, as I said, we define the boundaries, we define the entities, the acceptable relationship. Then we have a contextual judgment. So certain distinctions that require expertise, because not all human expertise can be broken down into data or into roles. So there are cases where there are two equivalent entities, or the terminology is different by region or by audience. Even if we add this information to the graph for a model, sometimes it's hard to understand this rule. And then there is, of course, the long-term coherence. So knowledge graphs evolve, and without governance, there might be a proliferation of duplicated entities. Their meanings might go drifting, and then it ends up in eroding the semantic trust that's innate in the knowledge graphs. So we do have these roles as the semantic editors that are able to bridge the data and the AI role of the model. So building these architectures where we have humans that are passed on tasks by AI, and then human pass on the task to AI, when we are bridging and nesting AI in human workflows, but also vice versa, nesting the human in the AI workflows. It's the right way, I think, to deliver something that's worthy of value, which is not just AI, because we know that companies are investing a lot of money in AI. And when you are only claiming, okay, I can produce this amount of words to you in a few seconds, but are you delivering value? Because anyone can do that with ChatGPT, but we all
Yes.
we
And
want to
we
make
see, and
sure.
we also see the consequences
Yeah,
in these last weeks. But I have a last question. We know that we are going, maybe not really still in 2026, but probably is going to be very mainstream in 2027, in a future where agentic search will be the primary thing. So agentic people able, let's see how much people will accept to buy directly from a search engine page or from a chatbot page. From one side, I think that people is buying from Amazon is not that different at the end of the day. But as someone, maybe old generation web internet user, sometimes I think that there is a correct, honest passion and enthusiasm for agentic search. Everything done by agents. Your user visiting your website are going to be agents and not humans. I'm not so sure. I think that this can bring to some extreme where the actual house of a business, which is still a website, their website is going to be something that, okay, it's not so important because people are not coming here. But actually, isn't this somehow myopic? Because I think that, don't you agree with me that people at the end of the day will also end on the website? And if a website has been written for chunks only, designed poorly because, I mean, just with multimodal things that can be used by agents, but don't you think that there is a risk to somehow neglect the website experience just because everything is going to be done on a chat, AI chat interface?
yeah. Right. So outwardly, we also been saying that I mean websites are going to be deprecated at some point. I mean, of course, we can foresee the future, but are people actually interested in browsing a website? Probably for niches, this will still be true. But if we're talking about e-commerce, at the end of the day, they want to scan for the most affordable pair of shoes that meets all of the requirements. And of course, it's easier to narrow down search through an interface than actually doing the mental work of looking for them on Google search. But at the same time, if we are, as you're saying, if we are producing websites that are not human friendly, so there are chunks or there are information that are not useful. On the other hand, of course, this will discourage people from browsing the website themselves. And of course, I think that there should be like a midway. So, of course, I think that the environment, the future of the web will not be agent only, but maybe it will be agent mediated. So we are going to ask AI systems to actually do the product comparison, synthesizing sources or content or recommending solutions, actually executing workflows. I mean, these are the tasks that, sadly people are asking AI mainly. But now, as you're saying, that agents are actually doing the job, there's this new optimization layer that we can call the machine interpretability. So it's a matter of making our website interpretable by machines. Does not mean that we have to dumb them down and not make them interesting for humans anymore. And I think that like structured data, knowledge graph are a good way of doing so. because when we are working in the metadata layer, we are already conveying this information to machines without the need of, downgrading the appearance of our pages.
The human experience, the page experience, let's call it
Yeah.
so.
So
So let's stop talking about everything ontology, knowledge graph. Let's try to know you more, something more about you. Before, when we started to talk to you, you were saying that as many people in our industry, we didn't born SEO. I mean, we many times we did something very different before. In your case, you said that you didn't even study something like computer science, information retrieval. You studied economy. But I always think, as we were discussing before, for instance, I'm coming from humanities studies, but at the end of the day, maybe always something that we have studied is coming out. For instance, what out of both years as a university student of economy are you still bringing with you when working on knowledge?
right. So actually, this is a very interesting question because I actually did my thesis at university for economics of culture, so cultural economics. And my professor assigned me a very interesting hands on thesis type. So it was a practical thesis about Amazon search. So when I graduated, Amazon was not at all used in Italy, for example, but it was widely used in the UK or in the US. So I studied basically the UX of searches, the UX of the page search of Amazon, and how it compared to the long tail theory. Like, how long is the tail of web search for products and how it applies to the economics theory of long tail? Like, there will always be a product online, a very, very specific product that people will search for. So, this long tail will never be zero, it will just be a very long tail. And when I started working at WorldLift and approached the SEO industry, like 6 years had passed since my thesis, and I said, "Oh, actually, I did something that proved itself, useful for my job." But then I completely forgot about it because I was doing something entirely different before. And that's a fond memory. And I really enjoyed doing that, working on that thesis because it was very, very interesting.
Yes. I'm totally agree. And when Beatrice is not thinking about knowledge graph and ontology, what Beatrice likes to do?
I like to run. I run half marathons. Not yet a marathoner, but I hope I will be within this year. And I like to read classics. I only read very old books and sometimes also books about data. And I like to watch a lot of movies. So it's like a duality. I either stay at home buried in books and films, or I go out and sweat a lot. There's nothing in the middle.
Well, more you are also lucky because you live in a beautiful city
Yeah.
like Rome, and I mean, I can foresee quite many places where to have a good run in Rome.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed, especially in the early morning, like on Saturday or Sunday when people and tourists are still asleep, and then you can go running in the city center, and
Oh yes,
it's really beautiful.
yes. Because the city center is of Rome, and I really suggest to everybody listening and watching us, go wake up. I don't care. Wake up very early or go to sleep very late, and
Yeah.
you will see, I don't know, the classic Piazza Navona empty. And that's where the magic of Rome really eats you.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That's a really good suggestion for everyone who wants to visit. Like, wake up early and just go.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice. It was a real pleasure to have you as my guest here for this session. I hope to see you soon in real life, and maybe, I don't know, maybe we can think about doing something like a brainstorming session about everything that we have just talked with you, with Dawn, Anderson, with the same Lazzarina, maybe with a special guest, but obliged not to talk too much, Andrea, so on and so on. Again, it was a real pleasure to have you here as a guest.
Thank you, Gianluca. Same for me.
And thanks to all of you. Remember, subscribe to the podcasting channel and ring on the bell to be notified about the new episode. As fantastic as this one we have just with Beatrice. Thank you and bye bye.